We're here today to discuss an exercise that we ran last April and present some lessons learned that we can share with the community, both in terms of researchers as well as asset owners and operators, on how to better prepare for incident response, both in IT and in OT environments. So you're a utility and you have an incident response plan. You're used to dealing with many cyber attacks against the IT network, and you're pretty comfortable with doing IR on that side. But on the OT side, perhaps you haven't considered the challenges of dealing with advanced TTPs or even modest TTPs against OT systems. We've seen, the horror stories and not so horror stories of other utility incidents, Ukraine 2015, 2016, and so on. And you probably are confident that you can deal with that. So you have expectations that your toolkit will go in and your people will go in and work and deal with it all. And you probably have some pretty high expectations. Reality is probably going to be much different. How do we avoid getting punched in the face when these things happen? Exercises are a good way of stress testing an incident response plan and seeing if the people, the processes, and the technologies are up to snuff. This was a live red versus blue exercise we hosted, but there are many different types of exercises, including tabletops and whatnot, and we'll cover those later on. I hope you've had a chance to go to the third floor to see the DARPA Radix Plum Island showcase. What they're doing with exercises there is really great, but that program is going to be ending sometime later this year. And I hope that their efforts and this talk can help encourage more people in the community to engage in similar exercises to this. So what we did in April of last year was called a Prairie Storm exercise. It was for a Midwest utility who asked us to tailor an exercise with a live IT and OT environment for a multiple day hands-on exercise to stress test whether or not their tools, their people, and their processes are up to the task. And so what we'll share here today is what we did, how we did it, takeaways from a gap analysis perspective and how to do that well as what challenges to avoid and how to deal with them, a dive into the OT impact TTPs for some researcher side discussion, as well as takeaways for asset owners and what you can do going home today to better prepare for incident response, both with your internal teams as well as external first responders. The evaluation goals for our client were to evaluate the tools for the mission, evaluate the skills of the people on the teams, to evaluate how well they work together as a team, both from the IT and OT perspective, and following processes that one party may know but the other may not, and communicating with external factors like the utility leadership as well as Cyber Command. This was a live exercise with over 50 people involved. There was live observers from the National Guard units, from the utilities involved, and there was over 15 players on just the blue team. The blue team involved the SOC operators for the utility, as well as field power protection engineers on the OT side that deal with the control systems on a daily basis. It also involved a cyber protection team from their local National Guard, that is that utility's chosen third-party first responder. We built a combined IT and OT network environment. On the OT side, we used real control systems from their actual field systems, and we configured them very realistically and tailored all of the attacks and analysis to their environment. We are also able to evaluate the mission platform that the first responders brought, which was developed by Cyber Command. However, we won't be talking about any of that platform's capabilities or any of these players' gaps in this presentation. We worked together in extensive planning to develop a formal master scenario event list that had planned attacks at certain stages, expected IOCs that we wanted the blue team to see, and many presentations for the observers to keep them informed and entertained. An exercise of even this scale, which is small to mid-scale, should involve many pre-rehearsals to make sure things are of the appropriate difficulty for your target objectives. We had 4 days of actual exercise, 3 days of it being hands-on, and at the end we turned around gap analysis reports to both the utility as well as the National Guard. The red team was comprised of NARI personnel as well as some cyber operations operators from the Guard and other fun agencies. And the blue team I talked about. The white team was primarily the lead power protection engineer for the utility as well as NARI personnel. For each attack in the exercise, the blue team was expected to correctly identify and characterize the attack as the attackers came in over the attack vector and affected every system, both over IP network and serial network. They're expected to triage the environment to prevent follow-up attack. It was live red team actions, and so the attacks would come in, directly cause an impact, and then fight the blue team as they were trying to restore and respond in the environment. Then they have to work together with the field engineer to restore the control systems and the environment to a good state, and then report everything they've found along the way to the utility leadership and cyber command, which we simulated on the white team. The IT network was pretty typical for a business network. You have a DMZ with some external facing web servers, some internal servers, many workstations of varying operating systems. On the OT side, it was a small scale replica of substation environments they have in the field. We used the same control systems that they use in their equipment, and we had the lead power protection engineer from the utility on our white team come in and configure them all as they would be in the field. So it was highly realistic, but not specific to any NERC-CIP sensitivities. And this was attacked by an attack vector chosen by the client. They are interested in what could an attacker who breached their physical protection do with various implants in their environment. So that was the con-op. The environment, the OT side was reporting loss of view, loss of control attacks. The blue team's been called in to investigate, and we have no further information. We've tried multiple troubleshooting techniques in our restoration efforts, and the engineers cannot figure out what's going wrong. While we carried out this exercise, we used some very helpful symbology graphics that are published in the JFQ by the Air Force, and it's called Operational Graphics for Cyberspace. We were able to depict in the environment play by play for every stage of the attack what the red team was doing, and for every stage of the defenders' actions, what they were expected to do or see. This was very helpful for not only the military observers, but it was very easy to understand for the civilian observers, the utility leadership, and whatnot. So if you do something similar, I would recommend using these graphics. For our gap analysis efforts, we wanted to make this as tailored and realistic to the client as possible. So that was a main reason we used the same actual control systems that they use in the field. However, we wanted to make sure we, with live observers, didn't run afoul of any NERC-CIP leaks, and so they would be sanitized of all the confidential utility data that would be concerned there. We used a similar topology, but not the actual topology to a substation, so that the attacks that we demonstrated didn't translate directly to their field systems. And in the restoration process, we made sure to rehearse that and work with the protection engineer to make sure that the steps that they were expected to follow on the blue team are the same ones that would be expected of them in the field. Additionally, what we did to make sure that each one of the attacks passed the so what factor and didn't veer on the side of FUD which is very common in this field, we made sure that after we developed the measle and all the attacks for it, we reviewed each one with the lead power protection engineer to make sure it was something that they would be concerned with as a utility, because we didn't want to waste their time, and this was a big effort. And so, to really put them to the test for gap analysis on response, you really have to see how they're going to interact with the control systems, with their normal functions and features, both documented as well as undocumented. The first day we got through all the TTPs from Ukraine 2015, 2016, and the defenders were easily able to deal with them. Those TTPs don't really pass my personal so what test anymore. And it's good to see that the community is gaining the skills to deal with those and catching up. The rest of the days involved TTPs that were far worse, and we'll dive into those at a high level, but not in a way that will enable attackers. When running an exercise to do gap analysis, there are many potential challenges to be aware of. First and foremost is really just allow who really needs to be driving decisions to be in the room to plan the measle and everything else, and avoid having too many cooks in the kitchen. If you're really doing gap analysis and you have specific objectives, make sure you minimize the noise around that actions and activities you are observing to evaluate for those objectives. This involves building up too much stress, building up too much activity from the red team for the blue team to deal with, running attacks too close together. From a defender perspective, it may come across as one continuous attack, which will pollute the analysis you're trying to provide. And so also avoid having an over-eager red team, both on the IT and the OT side. There are valuable reasons to stump the blue team, but you should have deliberate reasons for doing that. Analyzing how well they perform and carry out their tasks under failure mode is interesting, but there's lots of ways to do that poorly and to get low-value results out of your analysis. Another thing to be aware of is try to, as a white team, help bridge IT and OT cultural issues. It's easy for IT to just sit down and just focus on what they know, and the OT folks to just focus on what they know and not talk enough. In general, if it feels like the communication between the two teams on the IR team is almost at the point of over-communication, I think that's the bare minimum for effective communication. Another potential challenge, which I'm sure is nothing new to folks here, is the vendor politics. You may want to choose, like we did, to exclude the vendors from the running and planning of the exercise. While one of our vendors was extremely helpful, and we really wished we could have involved them, another vendor told us that everything that we were trying to do was completely impossible and that their systems can't be hacked. We decided to exclude them. Such attitudes are inconsequential and inaccurate and may pollute and bias analysis. Secondly, you may want to actually put in strong consideration into choosing times to pause an exercise. In all of my experience running CTFs, running workshops, running exercises, it's usually one person on the team that solves a given challenge. And the rest of the team doesn't necessarily benefit from that. You can do a hot wash all the way at the end, you can have folks write write-ups, but stuff gets forgotten. There's a lot of key details that get solved in the heat of the moment. And what we chose to do is after we saw the stress building up on day one between attacks, we came into the white team after they successfully completed it and told them, good job, the attack is over, take 10 minutes. And that allowed them to huddle, and the one person who solved almost all or all of that attack turned his laptop around and showed everyone else on the team exactly what he or she did to solve that and how they came to the conclusions that they did. And that was one of the most valuable soft things that we did in this effort. This helps also isolate the variables you're trying to analyze, perhaps. The team sharing helps accomplish lessons learned, but pausing helps you isolate variables for analysis so that stress and noise doesn't build up between attack and attack and attack. Because from their perspective, it may just be seen as one continuous attack from the red team, especially since we have active follow-up attacks trying to defeat them in each discrete scenario. Now, to dive into some of the TTPs at a high level, I'm just going to focus on the ones that caused impacts on the OT side. I'm not going to cover any of the IT stuff in detail. That's germane to this audience. And before the MITRE ICS attack framework came out last week, right when I submitted these slides, we had our own internal framework that we use for communicating to folks the various TTPs in this space, which has otherwise been a great challenge across this field. And so this is just a part of our model that we've used internally, and this is just the impacts. High-level impacts traditionally have involved the ones that operators care about: loss of view, loss of control. We also have loss of safety emerging. I really like that. I'm going to start using that more. And the way I teach TTPs that can cause impacts, I split it into direct impacts and indirect impacts. The direct impacts are techniques that are going to directly cause some change in the process or allow the attacker to change the physical process. The indirect ones may alter some property of the process, make it less reliable, disable the safety systems, so that it does not operate in a normal process and it's set up to operate unsafely or unreliably. Highlighted in blue are the ones that we used in this exercise. I'll just quickly cover the direct and indirect ones from just high, it's almost an oversimplification. High-level perspective, protocol and OT network abuse is very well documented for abusing all the different protocols in various sectors of critical infrastructure. Malicious misconfiguration involves misconfiguring the systems, the ladder logic, the automation logic. Exploitation and compromise involves zero-day, end-day exploitation, payloads, firmware upload, and so on in this simple system. On the indirect side, it ranges from social engineering the operators to attacking the system's interdependencies and interactions, and attacking safety systems to make them fail dangerously instead of fail safely. They are really, on the indirect side, in my opinion, only limited by the attacker's sophistication, understanding, and creativity in the environment. Whoops. So when MITRE and Dragos released the ICS attack framework, I had to rework my slides and take a moment to map what we did to that. And it feels like we were able to get about half of them in this exercise that we pulled out. This is more granularity than I would have normally gone into in communicating TTPs, but I think what they have done is really great, and the fine line you have to walk here is communicate it well enough, but not enable the attackers to be able to figure out how to do it to a system. The one recommendation I would make is that there is a final column to consider, and that is attacker TTPs to sustain the impact once it's been caused. They cram that into inhibit response function, which I feel if you're trying to use this to build playbook generation and AI and other capabilities that we'll probably see come out of this, that captures the automation logic, the engineer responses to the events, but it shouldn't include the incident responder actions. To cite an example of impact sustainment TTPs, back in 2015 in the Ukraine, this is why they DDoSed the call center so that the responders couldn't be dispatched to the field. On the IT side, I'm not going to cover the entire MITRE attack framework. We just had some very high-level business email compromise, end-day exploitation, pivoting, rootkitting, and exfiltration of secrets on the OT side to help out the attackers, highlighted in blue. This is a super qualitative and rough graph that we use to kind of illustrate the difficulty that the blue team would have in hunting down just the direct impact TTPs that we talk about, ranging from protocol and network abuse to misconfiguration of the systems to exploitation, whether it's end day to 0 day, and a variety of payloads. This will be published on the website. I hope it doesn't get used for anything super serious because this is a very qualitative effort. And the top axis indicates the incident response difficulty. This was definitely observed in this exercise to be true. Supply chain attacks really span the whole spectrum of difficulty, and depending on how much intel a supply chain attacker has, as well as lead time on pulling off that attack, they can really accomplish any of these techniques. The y-axis is the sophistication required from the attackers. Again, that's qualitative. The x-axis is both the ability to sustain impact on ICS systems as well as offensive capability. The final bucket, zero-day exploitation and advanced payloads, in my mind means payloads that introduce new TTPs that we have not seen before. That's definitely a stage at which if attackers if the blue team believes they are seeing this, they should absolutely call for help and call for outside experts. It is probably beyond their capabilities to respond to. Each one of these categories can, again, cause direct impacts to the physical process and the system, whether it's the power grid, oil system, hospital, and so on. So lessons learned. This is for the asset owners and utilities. And it also applies pretty well for other 15 areas of critical infrastructure. Things that you can go home and start today to better prepare for incident response on the OT side of your network involve, first and foremost, keeping a comprehensive IT and OT network map up to date. You should have in your change management process the last step being updating this document. That's easy. I don't need to talk about it for this crowd. Secondly, this is more nuanced. Thoroughly document all of the OT protocols in your environments. Everything layers 0 through 3, IP and serial. It would be ideal if you can get sample PCAPs, even just small ones, for these systems. The rationale is that whoever your third-party incident responder is, they may not have the people or the technologies to automatically recognize this. This is not reflective of this exercise, but this is something that directly helps the network baselining activity that is the first phase of incident response, where they assume your network map is out of date, and they need to get a baseline for the ground truth of what the network is actually like. So this allows them to see what should be there, what the traffic's like, what ports and protocols everything should be on. Thirdly, your IR plan should be exercised. It doesn't have to be a full-scale or small-scale exercise. It doesn't even have to be a big tabletop. Something as informal as a 1-hour seminar might be enough to get the ball rolling. Finally, what I've seen across, I guess, my whole career is that, and this was definitely a concern that was voiced in this exercise, is that the OT side may not have the necessary people, processes, and technologies to detect any of these TTPs. And it is a big question on when they will call for help if something does happen, and how long that will take. Finally, when it comes to execution, culture can be one of the biggest challenges. And if you can pull off high collaboration between IT and OT, I'm sure that sounds totally basic to this audience, that's going to significantly improve your chances for success. This scene was actually a point at which on the last day, we had stressed out the blue team so much they had decided to skip parts of the process for the restoration effort. And we're just clicking through the GUI and reclosing all of the relays without consulting the engineer or following the process. They also missed one of our payloads that set up a booby trap and caused the systems to go through a dangerous sequence of events as opposed to the original ones, and it ended up tripping the plant in the model. At this point, the lead power protection engineer, who's the gentleman on the right in the blue striped shirt, paused the whole exercise and told everyone, I can't just bring that back online. That's now going through a shutdown process, and it may be days to weeks till I can get that plant back online. That was a critical mistake and a great lesson to learn in a safe environment that they now will definitely make sure they don't repeat in a live environment. So key takeaways. Resilience is going to be always more feasible than perfect prevention, and also perfect detection. I hope this offers some greater awareness of hacker TTPs that can affect these environments, and offers some useful recommendations that you can take home at your organizations to improve IR preparation and execution. And if you'd like to learn more, we have a 15-minute video case study that conveys more than I could possibly convey in these 30 minutes on our website at NARI-cyber.com. There are a variety of different exercise types that you can use to stress test and rehearse your incident response plan. It doesn't have to be a full-scale exercise. It can start off with informal seminars and go to workshops and tabletop exercises and so on. I really like the Chaos Monkey and TEP note card idea proposed by Ginger Wright yesterday, as that is a great idea for building up a better security culture on the OT side. The way I see that working is asking your OT engineers a simple question. What are all the things that you could do to these systems that would get you fired? And documenting them all, boiling them down to things you could put on note cards, and then every week giving a different operator one of them and play them as an indicator of compromise and ask them what they would do if they saw this happen, and just kind of informally go through it. It could take less than 30 minutes every week, and you would substantially improve your posture and ability to respond to incidents on the OT side. Additionally, GridX, I've seen many utilities sit on the sidelines as observers. I'd like to encourage more to play as active participants. There's a huge several order of magnitude difference in value or utilities get between going from the sidelines to playing and actually following their IR plan. I've seen some utilities completely scrap their IR plan and start over from scratch because they found that it was insufficient for anything they faced in that tabletop. Well, I guess it's beyond that because it's getting great hands-on exercises now. Our effort was not really a full-scale exercise. Those are very hard to tailor. It was more of a small to mid-scale exercise, which hit the Goldilocks zone for what the client needed. So my organization is the Nebraska Applied Research Institute. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, part of the Nebraska University system. We're completely focused on services and applied research and development for cybersecurity of operational technology and critical infrastructure. And I hope what we shared today can help the community do similar efforts and improve the cybersecurity for critical systems across the world. Thank you.